The moth shuddered as it crossed into the Helios rift. Outside the viewport, space twisted like wet glass. Stars stretched into smears of light. The ship's instruments flickered, then died one by one. Only the emergency panel glowed red, casting long shadows across the cramped cockpit. Ren gripped the controls, knuckles white. "This isn't gravity," he muttered. "It's like space itself is breathing." Kyle watched the signal on his handheld device. It pulsed stronger now, steady, urgent. The shard from the conquered scout ship sat wired into the ship's main console, humming softly as if guiding them. Elira stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the distortion ahead. They had flown for 12 days, dodging patrol drones and riding solar winds to stay hidden. Now deep in the forbidden zone, they were truly alone. No rescue, no backup, just 3 humans and a whisper from the dark. Then without warning, the distortion cleared. Space snapped back into focus. Before them hung a structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was not built, it had grown. Smooth curves of obsidian-like material spiraled outward like the shell of a cosmic nautilus. Light moved beneath its surface, slow and rhythmic like blood in a vein. There were no doors, no windows, no signs of technology as humans understood it. Yet it felt alive. "The signal's coming from inside," Kyle said, voice low. Ren eased the moth closer. As they neared, the hull of the structure rippled. A section parted silently, revealing a tunnel of soft golden light. No weapons fired. No alarm sounded. It simply invited them. "Trap?" Ren asked, hand hovering over the thrusters. Elira shook her head. "If they wanted us dead, they could have crushed us the moment we entered the rift. This is something else." They docked. The airlock sealed with a sigh, not a clang. When the inner door opened, warm air flowed in, clean with a faint scent like rain on stone. The corridor beyond curved gently upward, lit by the same golden glow. They stepped inside, boots clicking on a floor that felt like polished bone. The walls pulsed faintly, responding to their presence. Cale reached out, touched the surface. It was warm, and for a second he saw a flash, a memory not his own. A city of crystal towers under twin suns, laughter, then silence. He pulled his hand back, startled. "What was that?" Elira asked. "I saw something," he said. Like a dream, they moved deeper. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. In the center floated a sphere of shifting light, neither solid nor liquid, but something in between. Around it, images played in the air, civilizations rising, thriving, then vanishing. Each one ended the same way, with a conquered ship arriving, broadcasting a message, and the world falling silent. But when Earth's transmissions appeared, old broadcasts of music, news, children playing, the images changed. Instead of fading, they multiplied. Jazz notes turned into swirling colors. A protest speech in Cairo became a storm of red and gold. A lullaby from Peru echoed as a spiral of stars. "It's reading us," Elira whispered. "Not just our words, our feelings." The sphere drifted toward them. It stopped before Cale. A single pulse of light shot into his chest. Not painful, but deep, like a key turning in a lock he didn't know he had. Suddenly, knowledge flooded his mind. Not in words, but in understanding. This place was an archive, built by a race so ancient even the Concorde feared their name. They had watched the galaxy for eons, recording every civilization that reached for the stars. But they did not judge with laws or weapons. They judged with empathy. They tested not intelligence but heart, and the Concorde had failed that test long ago. The archive showed them more. The conquered hadn't discovered faster than light travel on their own. They had found ruins of this very archive, stolen its secrets, and used them to build their empire. But they twisted the truth. They claimed only the worthy could join the stars, when in truth the archive had never set rules. It only listened. Humanity had never been tested because no one had ever brought Earth's voice here. Until now. The sphere dimmed slightly, then projected a new image. A small chamber deep within the structure. Inside it floated a single object, a smooth, teardrop-shaped crystal that glowed with soft blue light. The resonance key. The archive offered them a choice. Take the key and return to Earth. Activate it, and every mind in the galaxy would hear humanity's unfiltered truth. Not just words, but emotions, dreams, pain, joy, all at once. It would shatter the Conquered's lies, but it would also make Earth the target of every warship in the Alliance. Or they could leave, keep the secret. Survive in silence. Cale looked at Elira. She was crying, but her eyes were clear. "They called us chaotic," she said. "But chaos is just truth without permission." Ren, who had stayed near the entrance, arms crossed, finally spoke. "I spent years running from the conquered, hiding, pretending I didn't care. But I do. My sister died on Titan because the conquered cut off aid during a storm. Said it was not worth the risk." He stepped forward. "If this key can make them here, really here, then we use it." The sphere pulsed once, as if in agreement. A path of light formed on the floor, leading to the chamber with the key. They walked together. The air grew heavier, not with pressure, but with meaning. When they reached the chamber, the key floated gently into Kale's hands. It was warm, like a living thing. As he held it, he felt every human heartbeat on Earth, fear, hope, anger, love, all tangled together in a single messy chord. The archive showed them one last vision. If they activated the key, the conquered would come. Not with warnings, but with fire. Earth would burn unless the galaxy chose to stand with them. But the archive also showed something else. Species across the conquered worlds stirring. A hive mind questioning its orders. A warrior caste pausing mid-battle, haunted by a melody they'd never heard. The seed was already planted. Humanity's voice had already begun to spread. They returned to the moth in silence. As the ship undocked, the archive sealed behind them, vanishing back into the distortion of the rift. No trace remained. On the journey home, none of them slept. Kale held the key, feeling its pulse match his own. Illyra studied old Earth recordings, selecting voices, real ones, raw ones, to amplify when the time came. Ren plotted a course through asteroid fields and dead zones, preparing for the chase he knew would come. When Earth finally appeared on the view screen, a blue jewel wrapped in chains of Concord patrols. Ren slowed the ship. "They'll scan us the moment we hit the outer belt," he said. "We've got minutes before they know we're back." Kale looked at the key. "Then we don't hide." Illyra nodded. "We broadcast, not from a lab, not from a government station, from everywhere." They would send the signal through every phone, every radio tower, every satellite still under human control. The Conquered could jam official channels, but they couldn't silence a billion voices singing at once. As the moth slipped through the first layer of patrols, cloaked by a solar flare Ren had timed perfectly, Kale activated the key's first pulse. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. A single note of a violin from a street in Buenos Aires, a child's laugh in Mumbai, the sound of rain in Nairobi. The Conquered sensors flickered. Alarms blared on warships. But the signal wasn't data. It was feeling. And you couldn't delete a feeling with a firewall. Back on Earth, people stopped. They looked up. They listened. And for the first time since the blockade began, they didn't feel alone. The galaxy had mocked humanity for being too emotional, too messy, too human. Now, that very messiness was becoming their weapon. And the Conquered, for all their power, had no defense against a truth they had spent centuries burying. The first pulse of the resonance key spread like ripples in a pond. It was not a message. It was a feeling. A grandmother humming to her grandchild in Manila. A street musician playing a broken guitar in Cairo. The sound of waves crashing on a beach in Chile. These were not words the Conquered could censor. They were moments, raw, unfiltered, human. Across Earth, people stopped what they were doing. They looked at each other. They listened. And something shifted. Fear gave way to something quieter, stronger. Unity. But in orbit, the Conquered reacted fast. Their warships powered up. Patrol drones swarmed like angry wasps, scanning for the source of the signal. They traced it to the moth, still hiding in the shadow of a dead satellite. Orders came down from the high command. Destroy the vessel. Silence the anomaly. Ren saw the drones coming. "We've got seconds," he said, hands flying over the controls. He fired the thrusters, and the moth shot sideways, just as a plasma bolt vaporized the satellite behind them. Kale held the key tight. "We can't run forever. We don't have to," Illyra said. Her eyes were fixed on a small screen showing global networks. "The signal's spreading. People are sharing it, through old radios, mesh networks, even shouting it across rooftops. The Conquered can't stop it all. They needed a safe place to land, somewhere the Conquered wouldn't expect." Ren aimed for the Amazon basin, a region dense with jungle and forgotten tech from the pre-blockade era. As they descended through storm clouds, Concord fighters screamed overhead, but the thick canopy hid them. The moth landed hard in a clearing, wheels sinking into mud. They moved fast. Kale carried the key in a shielded case made from salvaged hull plating. Illyra had a backpack full of data drives loaded with human voices. Songs, poems, confessions, arguments, love letters. Ren kept watch, rifle in hand, scanning the trees. They found shelter in an old research station half swallowed by vines. Inside, solar panels still worked. Antennas pointed skyward, rusted but intact. It was perfect. While Ren set up perimeter sensors, Kyle and Illyra connected the key to the station's broadcast array. The moment the link was made, the key glowed brighter. It didn't need power. It drew energy from the emotions flowing into it from across the planet. "We're not just sending sound," Illyra said, watching the readings. "We're sending experience. Someone hearing this won't just understand English or Mandarin. They'll feel the weight of a mother's worry, the sting of betrayal, the joy of a shared meal." Kale nodded. That's why the Conquered feared it. Truth like this can't be controlled. Outside, rain began to fall. Thunder rolled. Then through the static of a handheld radio, a voice crackled, weak but clear. It was a fisherman in Indonesia, singing an old sea shanty into a broken phone. The key picked it up, amplified it, sent it skyward. One by one, more voices joined. A student in Lagos reading a poem, a nurse in Oslo humming to a patient, a rebel in Siberia playing a flute made of bone. The broadcast wasn't organized. It was chaos. Beautiful, messy, human chaos. And it was working. On a Conquered warship orbiting Mars, a young officer named Taylor stood at her post monitoring signals. She was from the Vireth species, tall, silver-eyed, trained to obey without question. But when the human broadcast reached her ship, she froze. The sound of a child crying for her lost dog tore through her like a blade. She had never heard grief so pure, so unguarded. Her hands trembled. For the first time, she questioned her orders. On Xylos, a hive mind colony that had served the Concord for centuries suddenly fractured. Worker drones stopped building weapons. They gathered in circles, replaying a jazz solo from New Orleans over and over, their shared consciousness overwhelmed by the idea of individual expression. The Concord High Command panicked. They issued emergency decrees. All human signals were now classified as cognitive contamination. Any ship receiving them was to be quarantined. Any species showing signs of emotional instability would be re-educated, but it was too late. The seed had sprouted. Back in the jungle, Kale watched the global feed. Protests were breaking out on Conquered-controlled worlds. Workers refused to load warships. Pilots hesitated before firing. The alliance that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was cracking from within. Then the alarms blared. "Conquered dropship inbound," Ren said, peering through a cracked window. "They found us." Kale didn't flinch. "Then we finish this." Illyra connected the final cable. The broadcast array hummed to life. The key floated above the console, spinning slowly, gathering every human voice it could find. "We don't need to win a war," Illyra said. "We just need to be heard." The dropship landed a kilometer away. Heavy boots crunched through the undergrowth. Concord enforcers, armored, faceless, armed with stun lances, moved in formation toward the station. Ren took position by the door. "I'll hold them off. You can't stop them," Kale said. "I don't have to," Ren replied, checking his rifle. "Just buy you time." The first enforcer kicked in the door. Ren fired. Not to kill, to delay. Stun rounds sparked against armor. The enforcers advanced, methodical, relentless. Inside, Kale activated the full broadcast. The key flared. This time it didn't just send sound. It sent memory. Every human joy, every sorrow, every act of courage and cruelty poured into the signal. It wasn't filtered. It wasn't polished. It was real. On the bridge of the Concord flagship, the High Arbiter watched the data flood in. Her species had long ago erased emotion to achieve perfect order. But now, buried deep in her genetic code, something stirred. A memory of her grandmother's hands weaving star charts, a song she'd sung before the purge of feeling. Tears, real tears, welled in her eyes. She gripped the arm of her throne, shaking. "Shut it down," she screamed. But her officers stood frozen, lost in human dreams. Back in the jungle, the enforcers reached the control room. Ren was down, bleeding but alive. Kale stood before the console, arms wide, shielding the key. One enforcer raised a stun lance. But then it paused. Through its helmet, it heard a voice, a young boy in Nairobi describing his first rainstorm. The enforcer's hand trembled. It lowered its weapon. The others followed. One by one, they removed their helmets. Their faces were not monsters. They were tired, confused, awake. Illyra stepped forward. "You don't have to serve them anymore," she said softly. Silence filled the room. Then from outside, more voices joined the broadcast. Not just from Earth, but from a dozen worlds. A Virith warrior singing a lullaby, a Xylos drone humming a blues riff, a miner on a frozen moon reciting a human poem he'd heard in a dream. The resonance key wasn't just Earth's voice anymore. It was becoming the galaxy's. The enforcers dropped their weapons. They sat on the floor listening. Kale knew the Concord would not surrender easily. The Grand Armada was already gathering. War was coming. But something had changed. The galaxy was no longer blind. And once you've heard the truth, you can't unhear it. As dawn broke over the jungle, the broadcast continued. Not as a weapon, not as a plea, but as an invitation to feel, to remember, to choose. And for the first time in centuries, the stars listened, not with judgment, but with wonder. The jungle air hung thick and wet as Kale, Illyra, and Ren huddled in the old research station. Rain drummed on the rusted roof like 1,000 fingers tapping in warning. Outside, the Concord dropship sat silent, its engines cooled, its soldiers gone still. Not dead, just changed. They sat in the mud, helmets off, eyes distant, listening to the broadcast pouring from the station's antennas. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was something deeper. A current of feeling that moved through the air like wind. Kale watched them through a cracked window. One enforcer, tall and pale-skinned with silver tattoos along his jaw, held a small device to his ear. On it played a recording of a young girl in Mumbai describing how she taught her little brother to tie his shoes. The enforcer's shoulders shook. He wasn't crying, he didn't have tears, but his breath came fast, like he was drowning in something beautiful. "They're not enemies anymore," Illyra said softly, standing beside Kale. "They're witnesses." Ren leaned against the wall, pressing a torn sleeve to a gash on his arm. "Don't get soft," he muttered. "The real storm's coming. The Grand Armada doesn't send dropships when they're angry. They send fire," he was right. Deep space sensors, patched together from old satellite parts, showed a gathering of lights near the edge of the solar system. Hundreds of them, warships, carriers, dreadnoughts. The full might of the celestial Concord mobilized at last. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming to erase Earth from the stars forever. But the resonance key pulsed steadily on the console, glowing like a captured star. It had grown since they activated it. Now it didn't just echo human voices, it wove them together. A fisherman's chant in the Philippines blended with a rebel's speech in Patagonia. A lullaby from Iceland merged with a street rapper's verse in Lagos. The signal was no longer a collection of sounds. It was a single living voice, and it was spreading faster than the Concord could block it. On distant worlds, beings who had never questioned their place in the Concord's order began to stir. In the crystal cities of Virith, warriors laid down their blades after hearing a recording of a human grandmother forgiving the soldier who killed her son. On the floating farms of Xylos, hive drones broke formation to replay a jazz trumpet solo from Chicago, their shared mind trembling with the idea of freedom. Even in the Concord's own capital, high-ranking officials locked themselves in private chambers, whispering old songs their ancestors had sung before the Great Silence. The Concord tried to fight back. They jammed frequencies. They severed data links. They declared the human signal a psychic plague and ordered all listening species to undergo neural cleansing. But you couldn't cleanse a memory once it lived inside you. You couldn't delete a feeling that had already changed your heart. Back in the jungle, Kale knew they couldn't hide much longer. The station's location would be traced. The Concord would burn the forest to ash if they had to. But he also knew something else. They didn't need to win a battle. They just needed to survive long enough for the truth to take root. "We have to get the key to a stronger transmitter," he said. "Somewhere it can reach every corner of the galaxy at once." Illyra nodded. "The old global broadcast array in Geneva. It's buried under rubble, but the core might still work. It was built to send signals to deep space, strong enough to punch through any jamming." Ren groaned as he stood. "Geneva's crawling with enforcers. They turned it into a command center after the quarantine." "Then we go quiet," Kale said. "No ship, no comms. Just us and the key." They moved at night. The enforcers who had surrendered stayed behind, guarding the station like penitents at a shrine. Ren led them through flooded rivers and overgrown ruins, avoiding roads using old smuggling routes he'd memorized years ago. The key, wrapped in a heat-dampening cloth, hung from Cale's neck like a second heartbeat. 3 days later, they reached the outskirts of Geneva. The city was dark. No lights, no voices. The Conquered had emptied it of people, turning streets into patrol zones and buildings into watchtowers. Drones hovered like mechanical vultures. They slipped through sewer tunnels, the stench thick but the path clear. Elira used a handheld scanner to map safe routes, avoiding motion sensors. Ren moved like a ghost, disabling cameras with well-placed stones and short-range EMP bursts from a device he'd cobbled together. Deep beneath the old United Earth building, they found the entrance to the broadcast array. The door was sealed, but Cale used the Conquered shard, still humming faintly, to trick the lock. It opened with a sigh. Inside, the chamber was vast and cold. Dust floated in shafts of emergency light. At the center stood the transmitter, a ring of black metal taller than a man covered in frost. It looked dead, but when Cale placed the key on its central pedestal, the frost melted. Lights flickered to life. The ring began to hum. "It's waking up," Elira whispered. They worked fast. Cale rerouted power from backup cells. Elira synced the key to the array's frequency matrix. Ren stood guard at the entrance, listening for boots on stone. Then, without warning, the lights died. A voice echoed from the tunnel. "You are out of time." Conquered enforcers filled the doorway, weapons raised. But these weren't the confused soldiers from the jungle. These were elites, black armor, red visors, no hesitation in their stance. Their leader stepped forward. She removed her helmet. Her face was sharp, eyes like ice. She wore the silver collar of a High Inquisitor. "I am Vera," she said, "and you will not poison the galaxy with your chaos." Cale stood between her and the key. "It's not poison. It's truth. Truth is order," Vera snapped. "Not this." "Noise," she raised her hand. The enforcers aimed, but before they could fire, the key pulsed. Not a sound. A wave. It rolled through the chamber like a silent thunderclap. Vera staggered. Her eyes widened. She really saw a memory not her own. A human child planting a seed in cracked earth, whispering, "Grow, please grow." Hope so pure it hurt. She dropped to one knee. "What is this?" "It's us," Elira said. "All of us. The good and the bad. The messy, loud, loving, broken truth of what it means to be alive." Vera's hand trembled. She looked at her enforcers. They were frozen, faces slack, lost in their own visions. Kyle stepped toward her. "You don't have to serve silence anymore." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Vera slowly lowered her weapon. "The Armada arrives in 6 hours," she said, voice rough. "They will burn this planet to glass." "Then we make sure they hear us before they fire," Cale replied. Vera nodded once. She turned to her enforcers. "Stand down." They obeyed. With their help, they finished the setup. The array powered fully. The key floated above it, now blazing with light. Cale initiated the final sequence. This broadcast wouldn't just be heard. It would be felt in the bones of every living being within 1,000 light-years. As the signal launched into the void, Ren looked up at the ceiling as if he could see the stars through layers of stone and steel. "They're coming," he said. "Let them come," Elira answered. "Now they'll know who we are." And high above, in the silent dark, the first ships of the Grand Armada crossed the edge of Earth's sky. Not as judges, but as listeners. The Grand Armada filled the sky like a storm of steel. Hundreds of warships, black and sharp, hung in silent formation above Earth, their weapons charged. Their crews stood ready. The Conquered's final judgment had arrived. Burn the planet. Silence the noise. Restore order. But something was wrong. On the bridge of the flagship Sovereign Will, High Arbiter Malus stared at her screens. The human signal wasn't fading. It was growing, stronger, deeper. It poured into every ship, bypassing firewalls, slipping through shield harmonics, seeping into neural implants. It wasn't data. It was memory, feeling, truth. She heard a voice, a young man in Nairobi, laughing as he fixed a broken radio with scrap wire. She felt his joy like sunlight on her skin. She hadn't felt joy in 70 years. Not since the Conquered declared emotion a weakness and purged it from her people's culture. Her hands shook. "Shut it out," she ordered, but her voice cracked. Her officers didn't move. They stood frozen, eyes wide, lost in human dreams. One wept silently. Another whispered a lullaby in a language he'd never learned. Across the fleet, the same thing happened. On the warship Iron Resolve, a Virith warrior dropped his plasma rifle. He was hearing a recording of a human mother singing to her sick child in Jakarta. The raw love in her voice unraveled something deep inside him. He sank to his knees, trembling. On the carrier, Silent Hand, a Xylos hive drone's shared mind fractured. They had never known individual thought until now. A single drone replayed a blues song from Memphis over and over, its metallic body swaying to a rhythm it didn't understand, but deeply felt. The others followed. Soon, the entire drone wing stopped responding to commands. Back on Earth, Kale, Elira, and Ren watched from the ruins of Geneva. The sky glowed red with the heat of idling engines. Conquered dropships hovered, but none landed. None fired. "They're listening," Elira said. Ren kept his rifle ready, but his eyes were soft. Maybe they're finally hearing. The resonance key, now linked to the global broadcast array, pulsed like a living heart. It didn't just send Earth's voice anymore. It gathered every response from across the galaxy and wove it back into the signal, a Virith warrior's first tear, a Xylos drone's hum of wonder, even Vera's quiet confession in the underground chamber. "I forgot what hope sounded like." The broadcast became a conversation. In cities across Earth, people gathered on rooftops, in parks, and empty streets. They didn't hide. They sang, they spoke. They played music from old phones and broken speakers. A farmer in Peru blew a flute made of reed. A teenager in Seoul beat a rhythm on a dented pot. A poet in Cairo recited verses about stars and scars. Their voices rose together, raw and unafraid. The Concorde ships trembled, not from weapons but from the weight of what they were hearing. High Arbiter Malus walked to the viewport of her command deck. Below, Earth turned slowly, blue-green scarred, alive. She saw no armies, no fleets, just people, standing, singing, refusing to be erased. A memory surfaced, her own childhood, before the purge. Her grandmother holding her hand, pointing to the stars, saying, "One day, you'll meet others like us, and you'll share stories." The Concorde had called that foolishness, but now Malus understood. Stories were not weakness. They were bridges. She turned to her officers. "Stand down, all weapons." Her second-in-command stared. "Arbiter, the order is to—" "The order was based on a lie," she interrupted. "We were never the guardians of order. We were the jailers of silence." She opened a fleet-wide channel. Her voice, once cold and sharp, now carried something new. Regret, yes, but also resolve. "All Concorde vessels, cease hostilities. Lower shields. Receive the full signal. Do not filter. Do not resist, just listen." Silence followed. Then one by one, ships powered down their weapons. Dropships landed gently, not as invaders but as guests. Enforcers stepped out without armor, faces open, eyes searching. On the ground, humans did not cheer. They did not attack. They simply walked forward. A woman offered water to a Virith soldier. A child handed a flower to a Xylos drone. No words were needed. The broadcast had already said everything. Kale watched it all from the edge of the ruins. The key floated beside him, dimming slightly, its work nearly done. It had not won a war. It had made war impossible. Elira joined him. "They came to destroy us," she said, "and we gave them a song instead." Ren spat on the ground, but there was no anger in it. "Guess chaos beats control every time." Days passed. The Armada remained in orbit, but now it was part of the conversation. Concorde scientists, once forbidden to study human culture, requested access to Earth's archives. Artists from Virith asked to learn jazz. Xylos engineers wanted to understand how humans built radios from trash. The old rules were breaking, not with violence but with curiosity. Then High Arbiter Malus descended to Earth. She came alone in a simple gray robe, no weapons, no guards. She walked through Geneva until she found Kale, Elira, and Ren near the broadcast array. She bowed her head. "We were wrong," she said. "Not just about you, about everything." Kale studied her. "What happens now?" "You teach us," she replied. "Not how to build ships or weapons. How to feel without fear. How to remember without shame." Elira smiled faintly. "It's messy. It hurts sometimes. We know," Malus said. "But silence hurts more." Negotiations began, not in war rooms, but in open fields, shared meals, music circles. The conquered did not surrender. They transformed. They agreed to dismantle the quarantine, to open star lanes to all species, not just approved ones, to share knowledge, not hoard it. But the biggest change came from within. Across the galaxy, species long silenced by the conquered began to speak. A water-world people who communicated through color and ripple, a desert-dwelling race that stored history and scent. They reached out to Earth not for technology, but for connection. Humanity, once mocked as chaotic and primitive, became the unexpected heart of a new kind of alliance, one built not on power but on shared truth. And through it all, the resonance key rested quietly in the Geneva chamber, no longer glowing but still warm. It had done its work. The galaxy was no longer listening with judgment. It was listening with care. As night fell, Kyle stood on a hill outside the city looking up. The stars seemed closer now, brighter. Not cold points of light, but eyes watching back, curious, kind, awake. Earth had not conquered the galaxy. It had reminded it how to be alive. The morning sun rose over Geneva, soft and golden, as if the sky itself had forgiven the years of fear. The Grand Armada still hung in orbit, but its warships no longer pointed weapons at Earth. Instead, their hulls reflected the light like open hands. Down below, humans and conquered envoys walked side by side through the city's broken streets, not as victors and vanquished, but as strangers learning each other's names. Kyle stood near the ruins of the broadcast array, watching a Virith elder kneel beside a child, listening as the boy described how he built a kite from plastic bags and wire. The elder's silver eyes shimmered. He had never seen a kite. He had never seen a child play without purpose. On his world, play was seen as wasted time. But here, in this quiet moment, he understood something new. Joy did not need to be useful to be valuable. Illyra sat nearby on a fallen column, sharing bread with a Xylos drone. It had no mouth, but it absorbed the scent and texture through sensors on its shell, then hummed a low, pleased tone that matched the rhythm of a lullaby it had heard days before. Illyra smiled. "You're learning," she said. The drone pulsed gently in reply. Ren leaned against a rusted lamppost, arms crossed, watching the scene with quiet disbelief. He had spent years running from the conquered, hating them, fearing them. Now one of their highest officers, Vera, stood just a few meters away, helping clear rubble with bare hands. She caught his eye and gave a small nod. No words, just respect. The resonance key rested inside the chamber, silent now. Its work was done. It had not forced change. It had simply made change possible by reminding the galaxy what it had forgotten, that to feel is not weakness, it is the root of all understanding. But peace was not yet certain. High Arbiter Malus had called for a gathering, not of generals but of thinkers, artists, healers, and dreamers from every known world. They would meet on Earth in a field just outside Geneva, to write new rules for the stars, not laws carved in stone but promises spoken from the heart. As the day warmed, beings arrived from across the galaxy. Some came in sleek shuttles. Others walked from dropships, their forms strange and wondrous. A species of living mist. A people with skin like bark. A group who communicated through shifting patterns of light on their faces. They brought no weapons. Only gifts, seeds from alien soils, songs recorded on crystal shards, stories woven into cloth. Humans came too. Not just leaders, but farmers, teachers, street musicians, old women who remembered wars, young men who had never known peace. They set up tents, shared food, and played music late into the night. A Virith warrior sat cross-legged beside a blues guitarist from New Orleans, eyes closed, feeling the ache and hope in every note. A Xylos drone floated above a group of children playing tag, recording their laughter not as data but as something precious. Kyle watched it all, heart full but mind alert. He knew the Concord's old ways would not vanish overnight. There would be fear, resistance, old habits clinging like rust. But the seed had taken root, and roots once deep do not pull free easily. On the third day the gathering began, no stage, no podium. Just a wide circle of grass with Earth's blue sky above and the silent armada watching from orbit like patient guardians. Malus spoke first. She did not wear her arbiter robes. She wore simple cloth like everyone else. "We came here to judge," she said, her voice clear and calm. "We left our hearts behind long ago, thinking them a burden. But Earth did not fight us with fire. It fought us with truth, and in that truth we found ourselves again." She turned to Kale. You did not demand our surrender. You offered us a mirror, and in it we saw what we had lost. Kale stepped into the circle. He held no notes. He spoke plainly. We are not perfect. We hurt each other. We make mistakes. But we also heal. We create. We love even when it hurts. That is not chaos. That is courage. One by one others spoke. A Waterworld poet described how her people sang to their oceans to keep them calm. A desert elder shared how his tribe remembered history through scent and touch. A young human girl, no older than 10, stood on tiptoes and said, My mom says the stars are for everyone, not just the strong, not just the smart, everyone. No one laughed. No one dismissed her. They listened. By sunset, they had no treaty signed in ink. But they had something stronger, a shared promise. They would build a new alliance, not of control but of care. No world would be silenced. No voice too small to matter. Knowledge would be shared freely. Travel between stars would be open to all. And every species, no matter how strange or young, would have a place at the table. As night fell, they lit fires, not for warmth, but for light. Music rose again. This time it was not just human. A Virith flute joined a guitar. A Xylos drone hummed harmony. The living mist swirled in time with the beat. And high above, the stars seemed to lean closer, as if finally ready to listen. In the weeks that followed, the changes spread. Concord warships became transports carrying aid to worlds long ignored. Old archives were opened. Forbidden histories were read aloud. And Earth, once a quarantined backwater, became a crossroads, a place where species came not to conquer but to learn. Kyle, Illyra, and Ren stayed in Geneva, not as heroes, but as guides. They helped build the first open university of the New Age, where a human child could learn star navigation from a Virith elder, and a Xylos engineer could study poetry with an old librarian from Mumbai. One evening, as they sat on the roof of the rebuilt broadcast array, watching ships come and go like fireflies in the dusk, Ren broke the silence. They laughed at us, he said. Called us animals, noisemakers, unfit for the stars. Illyra nodded. And now the stars are learning to sing our song. Kale looked up. The first non-conquered envoy, a being of soft light from a distant nebula, was landing gently in the field below. It carried no demands, only questions, he smiled. We didn't rewrite the rules by breaking them. We rewrote them by remembering what they were meant to protect, not power but people. And as the galaxy watched, Earth did not rise as a ruler. It rose as a friend, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, and in a universe that had forgotten how to feel, that was the rarest thing of all.